MCAT 2017 Cram, Critical Analysis and Reasoning Skills, Flashcard Set 20.3, Huns and Eurasian History. As you view the reading of this passage, you'll notice some highlighted snippets of text. What I want you to do is garner meaning from these specific selections in order to answer the 2 reasoning within the text questions that follow. The passage is extremely manageable, and so are the questions. So good luck and happy reading. Paragraph 1. The greatest territorial expansion and the greatest power of the Hun Empire in the West was when the center of their activities reached Pannonia. Pannonia was an ancient province, pictured here, of the Roman Empire, bounded in the north and east by Danube, coterminous westward with Noricum and Upper Italy, which you probably can't see here, and southward Dalmatia and Upper Moesia. Okay? Under the leadership of Attila being a leader of the Hunnic Empire, which was a tribal confederation of Huns, and here goes his side profile rendering. I don't know how accurate this is. He's supposed to be like Mongolian or something, so this might not be too accurate. So don't crucify me if you don't think this is the exact rendering of Attila, okay? Because I've had some people message me on stuff like that. Ostrogoths and Alans, among others, on the territory of Central and Eastern Europe. Greek and Latin sources indicate that Attila was of royal lineage, a line which for generations had ruled the Huns. Attila was a great statesman who did great deeds. He was a wise ruler, a skilled diplomat, and a fair judge. With good reason, he should be considered a prominent figure in the first millennium AD. The Hun land under Attila's control consisted of 4 areas. The northern border of the kingdom stretched from the Huns' homeland to the west of Germany. In the south, both Roman empires, that is, the Eastern Roman and the Western Roman Empire, were paying tribute. Tribute meaning payment made periodically by one state or ruler to another, especially as a sign of dependence, to Attila. In terms of its territory and influence, Attila's empire covered geographically almost all the 4 corners of the known world, from east to west and from north to south. The Hun territory ran from east to west, from Altai, Central Asia, and the Caucasus to the Danube and the Rhine. The Huns' union in Central Asia contributed later to the emergence of the Kazakh nation and other Turkic peoples. By accumulating and concentrating power, the Hun ruler organized an invasion of Western Europe in order to expand the territory of his state. And so the Catalonian fields of Champagne, that is Gaul, became the place for the decisive major battle. Parisians were frightened of Attila's cruelty and anger, so they decided to send women and children and some belongings to a safe place. There Saint Genevieve turned up, and she resolved to persuade women not to leave the city in which they had been born and grown up, in the hour of danger, and moreover to prepare themselves and their men to the defense. Saint Genovia told the women to ask God for help and salvation. They listened to Genovia and decided to stay in the city and rely on God's mercy. Paragraph 2. In the evaluation of the largest battle, a number of Western history scholars, both modern and contemporary, drew on information from the chronicles of the early Middle Ages and used them uncritically. The objective evaluation of historical reality is always difficult. A Belgian historian, Perrin, concluded that Attila was getting through the Rhine in the spring of 451 AD, devastated everything up to the Loire. Aetius stopped him with the help of the Germans near Troyes, the Franks, Burgundians, and Visigoths, and others were good allies. Just note, there's like a lot of weirdly organized and orchestrated names here, so if you don't know the exact pronunciation, don't harp on it, because more than likely you're not going to need to know the correct pronunciation to answer the questions. You'll just need to be able to recognize a name or two, okay? So, I mean, while you should know how to enunciate and sound out the syllables of words, it's not the priority for the exam, okay? The military art of the Romans and German bravery decided everything here. Attila's death in 453 AD resulted in the collapse of Hun power and thereby saved the West. In our opinion, the situation in Gaul can be explained by the over-large scale of Attila's campaigns and the inability to restrain dozens of tribes and entities that were not related to the Huns socially and ethnically within the vast territory under the unified leadership. But let us return to the momentous meeting of 452 AD. In the spring of 453 AD, the ruler of the Hun Empire, Attila, died. All right, that's it. That wasn't that bad. Which of the following passage assertions is presented as evidence that Attila should be considered a prominent historical figure? Is it A, Parisians were frightened of Attila's cruelty and anger? Is it B, Attila invaded Gaul? Is it C, Attila was of royal lineage? Or is it D, the greatest territorial expansion of the Hun Empire was under the leadership of Attila? Definitely press pause if you need to, and I'll give you a moment to think. If you need to, refer back to the passage to find the text support to select the correct answer choice by opening up a second window. Sorry, I got really tongue-tied. All right. Okay, so this reasoning within the text question wants you to recall or think about the evidence the author uses to support this key argument, okay? So in the opening first paragraph, the author writes that Attila should be regarded as, quote, a prominent figure because, quote, the greatest territorial expansion and the greatest power of the Hun Empire in the West was, ... under the leadership of Attila. So it's looking like answer choice D is going to be the correct answer choice. While royal lineage is an attribute that might be associated with Attila's high status and the fact that he was a prominent historical figure, these are based on his accomplishments. The fact that Parisians were frightened of Attila's cruelty and anger may have served him well in some respects, but it's not presented as evidence of his prominence. Also, Attila's invasion of Gaul was a failure, so his choice to attempt it does not, it's in and of itself, speak to his prominence. The only thing here that would speak to his prominence is answer choice D, The greatest territorial expansion of the Hun Empire was under the leadership of Attila. All right. Okay. The author mentions tributes paid to Attila by the Romans in order to support which of the following claims about the Huns? The Huns, A, created a very sophisticated banking system. B, had a vast sphere of influence and political power. C, were unable to create a single unified nation state. Or D, were feared and respected. I'll give you a moment to think. This one might be a little tricky. All right. So in this reasoning within the text question, you have to recall or think about the evidence the author uses to support the one of these key arguments. So one of them is correct, okay? So the passage doesn't discuss economic issues or imply that the Huns had a sophisticated banking system. The first thing I thought was this was like a really ridiculous choice, okay? And let's see what else. So the author is mentioning that both Roman empires were paying tribute was in order to illustrate the empire's territory and influence, as mentioned here, okay? Although the author mentions that the Parisians were frightened of Attila, the tributes are not provided by the author as evidence for this point. So you can't just go ahead and make this assumption here. And although the author later mentions the Huns' inability to control dozens of tribes under the leadership of Attila, his unified leadership, this is referring to a reason for the failed invasion of Gaul and has no relation to the tributes. So the best answer in this case is going to be B. Had a vast sphere of influence and political power. All right. Okay.